Hey everybody. Thank you guys so much for stopping by my channel, The Magical Solution. My name is Lailani. I'm really excited tonight. Tonight is a good night because I get to speak with an artist and talk about a tarot deck, which I haven't done in a really long time. I think the last time I spoke to a tarot artist or an oracle artist or a Lenormand artist was like maybe 2, 3 years ago. So I'm really excited to bring one on. And this particular person, I'm excited about number one, because, Boricua, I have to represent my Puerto Rican people. But this deck is stupid. This deck is insane. If you guys have not heard about this deck yet, I highly suggest you go over to US Games right now and pick yourself up a copy. This deck, Tarot NEOCOLONIAL de las Americas by Patrick Mcgrath Muniz, is a phenomenal deck, and we are going to be talking about it today. We're going to be talking about all of the imagery and all of his backstory and where all this inspiration came from and just everything in between. Plus, we'll be taking your questions. But before we bring him on, let's get to know who Patrick is. Patrick Mcgrath Muniz is an artist from Puerto Rico, working primarily with oil paintings on canvas and retablos. His work is inspired after Old Master and Spanish colonial paintings while addressing issues such as colonialism, consumerism, and climate change. Some of his previous solo shows have been at Museo de las Américas, San Juan, Puerto Rico Museo Convento, Las Capuchinas in Antigua, Guatemala, Mesa Contemporary Arts Museum, and so many more. He obtained a BFA magna cum laude in fine arts from the School of Fine Arts of San Juan, Puerto Rico in 2003, and an MFA sum cum laude. Listen guy from the Savannah College of Art and Design in 2006. Patrick's work can be found at the Albuquerque Museum of Art and History, the Spanish Colonial Arts Museum in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and the Mesa Contemporary Arts Museum in Mesa, Arizona, as well as a number of private collections in the United States, Europe, and Latin America. In 2017, with Maria, the artist lost his home and main art studio in Puerto Rico. He now lives in his new home in New Territory, Texas, with his wife Blanca and son Francis, which, by the way, I met his son Francis, and he's adorbs. So without further ado, let's bring Patrick on. Let's get to know him.
Hi. Hello.
How are you?
Good. How are you, Lailani? It's a pleasure to be here. I really appreciate it. Your invitation for your show.
Dude,
Thanks
thank you
very
for
much.
saying yes. Thank you for saying
Yes,
yes.
of course, of course. Yeah, it's my pleasure. My absolute pleasure to be here.
This deck is phenomenal. It's really phenomenal. I am so impressed with it, and I had to come and talk to you. There was just no question that I needed you on this show because okay. So aside from the fact that you brought in this idea of, conquest and colonialism in the Americas, you also managed to tie it to consumerism, climate change, white supremacy, like all the different issues that we are kind of like facing as a result of the conquest and colonialism. You managed to squeeze all of that into 78 cards, and to be honest with you, that seems like an impossible feat, but like you managed to do it. So I need to find out from you. And not only that, but you managed to do it in a way that is very surprising to me. If you look at these, if you guys could look at these pictures closely, like this is the book that comes inside, right? This is the cover, okay? The back. If you notice, without even looking at the cards, the colors are light and they're bright and they're, um, you know, not as what you would assume a deck that's covering all of these serious issues would look like. How? Why? How did that all come to be? because that's a lot. You managed to squeeze in a lot in 78 cards, and you managed to do it in a way that was somewhat lighthearted, and that I got to give you props for. What was that process like for you?
Thanks. Well, it comes from years and years of research and traveling throughout Latin America. Not only did I grow up in Puerto Rico, but I also did some traveling in South Central America and the Caribbean and in Mexico. And I have fond memories, and I associate all this love for history, and that goes way back from childhood years, from the school textbooks, these brightly colored illustrations. And I was really fond of like using, markers, pens, inks, and all that. And I really wanted to bring back that personal connection that I had with history. I feel like I use some humor and satire in the work. So I feel like the visual language is more in tune with that sensibility.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm not ignoring, like you said, the harsh realities of a history that is quite painful, especially for peoples of color and indigenous people, Black slaves brought to the Americas by force. And all of that is covered in this deck, but I'm also going beyond it and seeing the whole picture of our present time, right? With the current themes right now. Even the pandemic is covered there, even though this deck was created, I started working back in 2016, and I completed this in 2017. So who would have, guessed that we would be going through coronavirus, but it's there.
Right.
So because plagues have always been with us, right? It's not, doesn't require much, to really dig back in history to figure out that these things are recurring. Climate change is really the at the front and center in many ways, but social injustice as well. And it's really a big challenge, like you said, because it's such a long history. Well, we're talking about over 500 years of history, conquest,
and 78 cards. Like
and
what?
78 cards. It's a challenge, and as I wrote in my book, I had to like pick and choose which ones struck a chord with me personally. I was very much influenced by the author Eduardo Galeano. Memorias del Fuego, which is a book I highly recommend. It's a trilogy, and I read that back in 1998. And since then, my work has been transformed by it. His narrative, his storytelling process, and all. It's quite intense, and from there, I give also I imbue the cards with my own personal experiences.
Right. I have to say, one of the things I was really excited about with regards to talking with you today is with previous card makers that I've spoken to in the past. It came from the perspective of someone who already does psychic work, or someone who is a historian, or someone who is, whatever that it is that they do that's in the spiritual realm that inspired them to do the deck. In your case, it's a little bit different because we're seeing a deck that, yes, has all of this stuff in it, and we're going to get into that, but we're seeing it from the perspective of the artists themselves, not so much the psychic who hired an artist to make a deck for them. It's the artist who happens to also do tarot that made his own deck. And I think that is so different and so cool. And the art that's in here surely represents that big time. So what inspired you as an artist to move from taking your paintings that have to do with, colonialism, consumerism, climate change, and say to yourself, you know what, I want to shrink them down and turn them into a tarot deck? Like, what caused you to do that?
It's a long process, but I'm going to try to make this story brief and short. When I started out with my thesis back in 2006 at the Savannah College of Art and Design, I was really interested in Catholic saints and that sort of imagery. derived from Spanish colonial art, and because that's what I grew up with, admiring the works of Jose Campeche, a Puerto Rican colonial painter, Miguel Cabrera from Mexico, and other artists from the Spanish colonial Americas. And I used to copy these works, as well as the works of all masters like Rubens, Velázquez, and El Greco, all these great Spanish masters. And I wanted to infuse these with new meaning, like give them more relevance to our own time. And since I'm half Irish American, half Puerto Rican, I have this way of seeing things, biculturally, bilingually, and see them and from two different perspectives. And I wanted to add that extra layer that was more contemporary. You have the consumerist factor, you have the American pop culture that has been so pervasive throughout the Americas, the fast food franchises, the big business corporations that you can see everywhere, all throughout Latin America, all throughout the world. And that is a new form of colonialism.
Yeah.
And I wanted to use these icons and these sacred images of saints in order to replicate what's going on today with the ruling corpocracy, but using these images. I soon found out that after studying them for years and years, after graduating from my master's degree, I started to find more interesting connections between Catholic icons and let's say the pagan Greek and Roman gods from antiquity. Right. There's very strong suggestions between the very strong connection between the Virgin Mary and Venus or Isis, for example. There's a syncretism, and I found that quite fascinating. So I started to connect the dots between those. That was the first step. And then I started to read about astrology, because of course you get the Roman gods are the planets, and these seem to be the archetypes. There seem to be some archetypal forces behind all these narratives. Say the narrative has to do with colonialism, conquest, and colonization, or whatever narrative you want to talk about. There are participating figures that seem to be recurring throughout history. And these underlying patterns or archetypes, I find them in the tarot. So it was quite natural. It took some time, but it took me there from astrology to alchemy, down to tarot. And then I rediscovered this very first deck of cards that I have from nearly 30 years ago that my friend Cesar gave me. And I found it back in 2016 when I was visiting my mom in Puerto Rico, and I found it there. I was searching for toys and stuff from the past, and I found this deck of cards. Like, wait a minute, this has been along with me all this time. Why haven't I used it? And of course, I was starting to have a lot more interest for it, but that was like the moment. Okay, I must do something with it. I took it with me. I brought it to Houston with, perhaps a few other things, but very little. That was like the most significant object that I brought with me. And what happens next? 1 year later, Hurricane Maria hits the island. Boom, the house, most of it, it's gone. My studio, which was located behind the house, gone. Like, I would say most of my early work for more than 15 years, gone. But for some reason, some mysterious reason, I have this deck that I saved, that I brought with me. So what does that mean? There must be a hidden purpose, I felt. There's something here. And of course, the connection with my friend, who happens to be my...
Oh, no. It looks like we lost him. Hold on one second, you guys. Some technical difficulty. Hello?
Stories. Yes. Oh.
Hey, okay, we lost you for just a second. You got disconnected for just a second. But that you got the deck from your friend.
Yeah, and my friend happened to be very much into ghost stories, paranormal activity, UFO sightings. He was like all over. Like, everything was of interest for him. Archaeology, like looking at the stars, and we had these long philosophical conversations. He was an artist as well, a mentor figure, a father figure. someone who was there through thin and thick. And of course, I was the skeptic because I was like, oh, come on. But, he came up with all these stories, but of course, some of them were like really like they seemed like there was no explanation. And I was always like skeptical, but at the same time, he's my friend, and I might give him some credence. And at the same time, we did see UFOs together. So I have to say that he was not making these up. Even though if you go to one of his many Facebook accounts, you'll find like all these Photoshop UFO sightings because he had fun with it. But that doesn't take away from the reality that there was some really weird stuff going on there. And I'm talking about Aguadilla. This is on the west coast of Puerto Rico near a Raimi base. There has been plenty of evidence and documentation of UFO sightings there. Well, that sort of a mindset of driven towards magical realism, towards this imaginative way of seeing things and finding things that are, trying to find a hidden meaning behind things and discoveries is what really inspired me to do this deck. Thinking of him, of his spirit, and what our friendship meant. And of course, I'm a lot more open now, still skeptical, but I really, whenever I hear these topics, I think of him.
Yeah, we're gonna get to that skepticalness in a second. But I definitely want to kind of talk a little bit about what you had just mentioned, how like you managed through your friend's inspiration to kind of add some humor and some surrealism and some playfulness to the deck, especially since you're talking about such serious subjects. Instead of making it so heavy, you were able to kind of add those little pieces in to lighten it up a little bit, but still get that message across. I think that that's really important for people to see. So for example, this card right here, that looks like Santa Claus. Am I correct?
Yes.
Is that Santa Claus?
Yes.
So you see how like it's like they're these kinds of images here, or like the literal illegal aliens coming through. And I think I'm assuming this is Trump, or this is some kind of like
maybe Trump.
Yep. So there's a funniness to it, but there's also a seriousness to it. The consumerism, colonialism meeting together, very overweight and taken by everything.
Yes.
And I adore that. I think that really adds another element, another flavor to this. And I wanted to ask, and I didn't get to ask you this in our pre-interview, so don't get mad at me if I pull if you're like, no, Lailani, no. But is this you?
Yes.
Is this you?
Yes.
Because I was flipping through these cards earlier, and I'm like, wait a second, that's the guy. Okay, all right.
Yes, and not only in that card, there are others as well. If you see a child, not all the children in this deck, but some of them are like childhood memories, or in a way they connect, to childhood stories or things anecdotes or stuff like that. So it is personal. So I wanted to make that part of the deck because, of course, as I said, I'm not a historian. I'm an artist, and I'm very, very mindful of the fact that history is a highly debatable, subjective topic that you can get into all sorts of debate, whether to include this or that figure, or why didn't you do this, or why, and there's many angles to it. And at the same time, we have to acknowledge we are human beings. We are always going to be prone to project. So why not go with it, and embrace it, because it's part of your history. You're telling a story, but you're telling it from your perspective, and you're aware of it. And I wanted to make that point really, important, and I pointed that out in the book as well.
I think that's what makes the difference between someone who is just talking out of their face versus someone who's aware of what they're talking about. Like, that's what makes an artist versus a doodler. You know what I mean? You're not just kind of like letting things out. You're intentionally making things happen. on paper or
I,
on canvas.
and I think the other point is honesty. Really,
Yeah.
an artist should always aspire to be honest. That no matter how many people you're going to offend, or if you're not pleasing the crowds or whatnot, you always have to stick to your beliefs, to who you are. You're not going to pretend to be someone who you're not. There are plenty of stories, very good stories to tell. Of course, we don't know them all because history is so elusive, and there's so many things that have been erased, unfortunately, from our past, from the continent, from the Americas, and that is quite unfortunate. I do hint at that erased history throughout the deck. The burning of the Maya codices, the taking of the land from the indigenous peoples, the destruction of patrimony and of cultural artifacts and of histories and all that. So there's a certain sadness to that as well, but at the same time, it would be far too depressing if I just focused on that. And I thought, we ought to also acknowledge that history is gray, and it's not all black and white. And we live in a time that we are very fortunate to be alive in right now, with all the commodities we have and all the things, even though there are things that are wrong, obviously, that we have to change in the system, we also are very fortunate. I feel like using satire and humor is the best way to reach more people, and be able to have this conversation and more in a lighthearted way, just like my friend used to have, because my friend was very much like that. He didn't really take anything too seriously, and it was all very satirical. He enjoyed pretending to be, someone who believed something totally different from him, just in a way to make fun. But, it was, that's why he was called El Loco.
And speaking of your friend, and speaking of the fact that he was called El Loco, he was also the inspiration for the Fool card and the card that's on the cover of your deck. When you describe his personality, his real life personality, it really does sound very similar to the Fool, very carefree, kind of jumping into the pool head first without checking to see if there's even water. Like, just a very, everything is a joke, nothing's serious, and that sounds very much like the character of the Fool. And I'm wondering, the journey that the Fool goes through the major arcana and with any of the influences of the minor arcana, are there parts of Caesar's story that you could also kind of put there as well? Like, did he also kind of follow like a journey of the Fool's situation as well in his life?
Yes, because he was pretty much someone who went from place to place without a stable home. You see in the Fool card, it's the number 0, so there's nothing, right? There's nothing to lose. He's only carrying a bag, loose, with very little possessions, but very little bias, open to the world, open to listening. This is someone who would hitchhike, and just strike a conversation with a total stranger, anyone, no matter their socio-economic status, no matter their color, no matter their gender, no matter what. He would just be friends with anyone and just listen and just learn. And he would be very insightful and then ask questions, in a very philosophical manner, just like Socrates, or, using like a Greek philosopher. And he was quite a character, and you would learn so much because there was always a joke and there was always a prank and there was always like this lack of seriousness. But at the same time, after any conversation, you would start thinking, wait a minute, there's a kernel of truth to what he just said. Wait, no, and then people started to perhaps rethink the way.
Maybe he's not so crazy after all.
He's not so crazy because he just saw things totally different. It's like seeing things from a totally different perspective. He didn't take any he didn't become like a fanatic on any. He wouldn't embrace anything completely. He would just go from from any place. This just like the zero, like the number zero is very open. You know, it's full of potential. You know, there's no opposites, there's no polarities. It's open.
Yeah.
So that's what I love about the Fool, and I felt like that was the approach I wanted to take with this deck. You know, so he marks the first step in this Fool's journey.
Is there anyone else in the deck aside from you and him that, you know, you kind of incorporated as characters from your real life?
Most of the characters there are from history.
History, yes. Like,
yeah, from
for example, you guys, he was talking earlier about some of these, like, harsher images.
Yes.
Right? These are tough images to kind of have to deal with that guy. But like, but you can see, you know, you can see in the background all of the current stuff. You know, these are amazing. And then here comes some of these historical figures. So you have San Martin de Porres, right? Lazarus. Crazy. Maria.
Yes.
Anthony.
Yeah. Niño de Atocha.
I love it. I love it. You know, these are, they're, you know, again, they're so hard hitting in such a weird way. And again, you know, you said it before, it's definitely inspired by your friend who kind of just is all over. And it really is hard hitting in a strange way, you know, to see a businessman with an indigenous person. Like there's no concept of time or space here. It's all like as if it's happening right now. And those things, it's almost as if when Columbus hit the islands, time stopped, and everything that happened thereafter is all happening at once. That's what it feels like when you go through this deck. And it's so serious, but yet hilarious. So many funny pieces. And I have to ask, like, because this deck has such a specific intention, can you read it for other things? Like, can I pick this up and be like, okay, is my husband cheating on me? Like, or do you have to stick to sort of like the major themes in life in order for this to kind of make sense?
Yes, sure. The reason why I did this deck was primarily for myself. I had no intention to publish this deck. This was more of a creative tool for me to bring out, you know, the creative flair and come up with different compositions and ideas for different paintings. And I had it also as a tool of self-reflection, introspection, meditation. But you can use it for divination. I mean, we tried it. My wife and I already did a couple readings, and they just work just like any typical Rider-Waite deck. And the reason for that is because it's inspired after the Rider-Waite deck, which is the most popular deck, right? That minor arcana are all illustrated, and they follow a very similar narrative. So the meanings don't change much. So if you do a reading and you want to do a divination session, they would pretty much work the same as any other deck. And I feel that there's much from history in general that can be applied to our personal lives. And I like to see my own life as a microcosm of the big history. Let's say I have gone through a prehistory. I have gone through a golden age, dark ages, a renaissance in my own life. So I see myself projected in history and history projecting into me. So we are just part of it, you know, it's one single story.
I love that. I see myself projected in history and history projected in me. I love that. I'm tweeting that. I'm stealing it, just letting you know. Awesome. But yeah, no, it kind of matches with this idea of like time standing still and we're all just kind of experiencing it all at once. If I didn't already show this, I feel like I didn't, but this is the back of the cards, you guys. Wow.
Octavio Paz, the Mexican author, used to say, todos los siglos son el presente. all the centuries are the present one. Like everything past, future, present, or everything is happening right now. Everything is happening right now. So why the time of Columbus is so important today, because that really marks the dawn of the global age, which we're currently living in. For me, that is, there's much debate on whether the Anthropocene started with the fossil fuel industry, or whether it started before that, the industrial age. But for me, I really think the Anthropocene, the age of man, when humanity is doing so much, creating so much impact and weight on the planet, it started right there with that
I think
landing,
so too.
the islands. So like it or not, there are benefits. Of course, there are many things that are wrong with it, but we are a product of it. So for me, that's why it's so relevant, so important to not commemorate, but remember and learn from it.
If I can get a little El Loco on you, it's almost as if another paradigm shift like came off of the main one. Like Columbus came and it's like it split, time split and went this way now. And now we're living in this shift and it's different. It's weird. People talk about it all the time. Oh, something's changed in the air because of this lunar eclipse or because of whatever. And I believe that when you experience certain shifts, it's palatable. And that was historically palatable. And you captured that here so beautifully.
Besides, by from a planetary perspective, from natural history, from that angle, really, what is 500 years? That's nothing. That was yesterday. The planet has been through so much that for me, 500 years ago is just yesterday, like a few hours ago. So it's easy to forget that this is really part of our age. The time of Columbus is part of our age. And interestingly enough, and noteworthy is that that's the time when the tarot first appeared as well. A few centuries
right before.
Yes, so there's a connection, because of course the first deck is documented in 1450, I believe.
Right.
Northern Italy, and from there on it evolves. You have the Marseille tarot in southern France.
Holy shit! I never put those two things together. I never, ever put those two things together. Wow.
Yes, it marks an age. For me, the tarot is really an important symbolic marker of our age.
Wow, man.
It connects the past with the future, because the mere fact that all the figures that you see here are figures from history. The Pope, of course, the Pope is still present, but you have many symbols that are Neoplatonic in nature. They come from ancient cultures, from the Middle Ages. They really draw from that fountain of inspiration, but at the same time they're looking forward, because there's this fortune telling aspect to the cards that connects past with future. So I find that fascinating, and just like,
hell yeah.
That's why I just had to do that deck.
Oh my god. Can you is it okay? I hope that this works. Is it okay if we kind of look at some of your other arts? I want to see if I can make this happen. Here we go. It's a share screen. Let me see if I can do it. Are you seeing that? No?
No.
Let me see here. How about now? Can you see it? No?
No.
All right. So I guess it's not working. Can you show us the ones that are in your room? I think you said you had the original.
It'll be hard to appreciate them. They're framed.
They're framed. Oh
and
man.
I have a laptop there, but those are the original cards there. You know, I had a show at the Jung Center here in Houston back in 2017, and these were part of the show. There's a local.
Oh, there's a local. Yes.
Yeah, it's. I apologize for the lack of light here. The lighting is not that great, but you can visit my website and you can see my work there. If you go on to www.retabloarts is one domain I have, retabloarts.com, or you can just type in Patrick Mcgrath Muniz, do a Google search, it'll show up. My website is www.patrickmcgrath-art.com, and you'll see my work there. I have, just like samples of my work there, portfolio.
Yeah, I posted it into the chat room now for everyone to click on. That was the site that I wanted to share the screen with, but I guess it's not working tonight. The storm is really rolling in, so we're gonna get some technical difficulties soon. I can feel it.
Lights don't go
But
out.
I definitely want to ask you, of all the things that we talked about, the main thing that really just impresses me so much is the fact that you are an artist, that this whole adventure was coming from the perspective of an artist, but not just any artist. You were already on this journey. Like, your artwork was already talking about, consumerism and climate change and all. So this was obviously a very passionate subject for you anyway. So for you to bring this into this world, I have to commend you and thank you for that, because those of us who would have never seen your art otherwise, because we're so indulgent in the tarot world, now get an opportunity to meet you, not as just a tarot artist, but as an artist, period. And I think that that's so cool that we get to bridge them and we get to meet new people and expose ourselves to interesting people. And you're definitely an interesting one, dude. You
Thanks.
definitely are. And
Thank
there's a lot of young pagan and spiritual artists out there who want to do something with their lives. They want to do something with their art. Do you have any advice just based on your story, or maybe even something that maybe Caesar would have said to them, in terms of their journey, and maybe helping them out and giving them some words of advice?
Cesar had a saying in Spanish. I'm gonna try and translate it in English. That he would often say, "No lo trinques." No lo trinques means don't be so uptight, right? In a way, don't be so. Sometimes we often stick to a formula, or we stick to a belief system, or to a way of thinking, a mindset, a political view, an ideology, whatever you want to call it. We stick to it, and we're so uptight, and it doesn't allow us to listen to other perspectives or other ways of thinking. It's always good to be an open vessel. And I feel like as an artist, you always have to be open to new possibilities, to listening, to experimenting with different ideas, and taking, your art elsewhere, or experimenting with a different spiritual practice, perhaps, or be open to the possibility that there's life out there, or that there's hidden messages and things that we see daily. Be open, be curious, be in this quest of meaning and inquiry, constantly curious about things, because that's who he was. He was like that, and I feel like there's much to be learned from that, that way of thinking, that the world would benefit, not only artists, but everyone would benefit from that, opening up and listening to the other side. And
I agree, following the signs.
Yeah.
You had a huge sign. You picked up a deck, and that was literally the only thing you picked up before Maria hit.
Yes.
it was a sign. That was a sign. You know what I mean? And I think it's one of those things where if you were not connected to that side of yourself, you would have just kind of let it pass you by. But something said, you know, and that's part of that listening. That's part of that journey, you know?
It is. It is. And sometimes we don't know, we don't understand the meaning. We don't understand the reason why this thing or this object or this sign or this symbol has come to us until like years after. Sometimes
Yeah.
time goes by. That's why I also feel it's quite useful to keep a diary, a journal.
Yes. Yes. I tell my students this all the time. Write shit down.
Be mindful of things like dreams. Write down your dreams, and if you don't have time to write when you're in your commute or something, these phones have recorders. What I do is I often record myself. You know, I have to remember this dream, and so for future reference, I'll have it there. I'm going to record this dream, and so perhaps how much I wish, how much I wish I had started and see, here's where it started. Or 30 years ago. Oh my God, that would be gold. Right now, that would be gold. Better than any material, you know, all the artwork was lost. It's okay. But having like a record of things that happened and having, I have one cassette, one of those like old 80s cassette with a recording of me interviewing Cesar and asking him questions. That is pure gold. And I have it and I digitized it. And it's like, man, there's so much truth. This guy was a prophet. And my brother and I, we affectionately call him and still call him El Profeta. We call him the Profeta because he was so right in so many things. Things that were happening, you know, in the world stage, politically, and church, and the churches. Many churches were running as businesses, you know, back where we lived and we grew up, and you know, and he saw right through it. Many things. It's just amazing, and it's just keep a record of things because it's so valuable. You have no idea. It's just so valuable to have it.
And it's never too late.
And it's
never too late. You know, like you were saying, I kind of, I wish I had, this information 30 years ago. You know what? One thing I will say about us Puerto Ricans, we last a long time. We last a long time. 90s, 100s. You got time. You got plenty of time to make those memories, to record those inspirations, to be enlightened, and to have those muses come to you and give you light. Plenty of time, and it's never too late to start that. So yeah, well, I'm just grateful you were able to bridge this gap. We were able to be exposed to you and be exposed to Caesar. I'm so grateful to Caesar for inspiring you for this, because he sounds like the kind of person that everyone should have as a friend. And I know this deck means a lot to you, and I'm sure it means a lot to him as well. So thank you for just sharing with us something that personal, but that amazing, because had you not taken that risk, we wouldn't have this. We would not have this today, you know?
Yes. And I wanted to mention, I appreciate that, those kind words, and it really means a lot. I wanted to mention that not only was that the first, that deck that I brought with me was the JJ1 Swiss Tarot deck from US Games that they published back, Stuart Kaplan published this back in 1970 and the 70s. And it was the first deck from US Games Inc., US Games Systems. And I told them the story, and they were like, wow. So I told it to Jen Kaplan and to Lynn Araujo, and they were right on board with it, because, you know, the fact that this was my first deck and that was their first deck, you know, there's that connection there, you know, of how these things happen. You know, there's a synchronicity or something. There's a meaning behind all of this, you know, being the first deck. And it's not going to be the only deck, because I'm already working on other projects as well.
Yeah, what's coming up? What's coming up? Tell us.
I'm working on a Lenormand deck now.
Like with the same kind of vibe, or like a whole different thing altogether?
I'm thinking more of paintings, like actual paintings. Like if you've seen my work, then that is pretty much, you know, trying to derive many of those images from the paintings, but make like the cards. There are 36 cards, so it shouldn't take that long as it took. Tarot NEOCOLONIAL de las Americas took a long time, but there was a lot of editing process behind it. I mean, it's a long story, but this one should not take that long, because and this one is going to be more inspired after, you know, personal experiences living specifically in the island in Puerto Rico. It's going to be more about that. Nice. You know, and I have some of Puerto Rico is reflected in Tarot NEOCOLONIAL de las Americas, but of course I also have, you know, the other countries that I feel like there are so many compelling stories. But I wanted to make a deck that was more personal, because I feel like I have to, and that is the next step. And of course, I have other decks in mind in the future, but that one is the one that I'm focusing on right now.
That's definitely, yeah.
Yes.
Well, I look forward to it, and I'm sure everyone else is too. And when it is finally out, we got to definitely get you back on the show to talk about that whole piece of work. So once again, thank you so much for coming out tonight. And to those of you in the chat room, thank you so much for spending your Sunday night with us. For those of you who are going to be watching on replay, thank you so much for stopping by my channel. And make sure you like, comment, subscribe, share. You know what to do. But most of all, remember that this is how we grow, you guys. Take it easy.